Children, now let us start the new chapter, sources of energy. Then what is energy? Energy is the capacity to do work. What is energy? Energy is the capacity to do work. When the object is said to possess energy, an object having capability to do work is said to possess energy. An object having capability to do work is said to possess energy. So what is energy? Energy is the capacity to do work. An object having capability to do work is said to possess energy. Energy exists in nature in several forms such as mechanical energy, heat energy, chemical energy, light energy, sound energy, etc. So you can say that different forms of energies are there. Different forms of energy. Which are the different forms of energy? So you can say that. So let us take some forms of energy. Mechanical energy, heat energy, light energy, sound energy, chemical energy, there are many forms of energy. These are the different forms of energy. Here you have taken some forms of energy. So mechanical energy is a form of energy, and you know that here it includes kinetic energy and potential energy. You know what is kinetic energy? An object in motion possesses what is known as kinetic energy of the object. So energy possessed by an object due to its motion is called kinetic energy, and energy possessed by an object due to its position is called potential energy. You know that water stored in the dam is having potential energy, and it is let to flow, then it is having kinetic energy. That potential energy of water is converted into kinetic energy, and the sum of potential energy and kinetic energy, the sum of the kinetic energy and potential energy of an object is called its mechanical energy. So generally you can say that energy possessed by an object due to its motion or due to its position is called mechanical energy. It is the sum of kinetic energy and potential energy. And you know that heat energy, light energy, sound energy, chemical energy, these are all some forms of energy. Then about the sources of energy. What is meant by a source of energy? We need energy to perform various functions of life. The materials that provide the requisite amount of energy is the source of energy. What is source of energy? The materials that provide the requisite amount of energy is the sources of energy. So you write what is sources of energy? The materials that provide the requisite amount of energy to perform various function of life is called sources of energy or source of energy. So what is sources of energy? What is source of energy? The materials that provide the requisite amount of energy to do various function of life is called source of energy. You know that we need heat energy to cook food. What are the various sources of heat energy? Fuels, wood, coal, kerosene, cooking gas, etc. are the sources of heat. So they are all the sources of energy which provides heat to cook the food. Similarly, we need energy for our transport. So which are the sources of energy for the transport? Petrol, diesel, these are the sources of energy for the transport. We need energy to light bulbs, electric tubes, to run radio, television and other power appliances, and the source is here electricity. And production in factories and agriculture also need energy. The source is diesel and electricity. So you can add here electrical energy. Electricity is also one of the source of energy, and there are many sources of energy. So you write that we need energy. We need energy to cook food. To cook food. The various sources are can write fuels, wood, coal, kerosene, cooking gas, etc. Coal, kerosene, cooking gas, etc. These are the sources of heat energy. And also we need energy for our transport. We need energy for our transport. So the sources of energy for the transport are the various sources are petrol, diesel, etc. Then also we need energy to get light. We need energy to light bulbs. Electric tubes, to run radio, television, and other power appliances. And other power appliances. So here the sources of energy is electricity. The source is electricity. Source is electricity. And also production in factories and agriculture also need energy. The source is diesel and electricity, mainly diesel and electricity. Production in factories and agriculture also need energy. Then what is the source here? The source is diesel and electricity. Source is diesel, electricity, etc. This way, to do any activity or to do any work in our life, we need energy. So we are depending upon the sources of energy. These are some different forms of energy: mechanical energy, heat energy, light energy, sound energy, chemical energy, electricity, etc. We learned that the total energy during a physical or chemical process is conserved. If energy can neither be created nor destroyed, we should have no worries. This result can be solved if we recall what else we learned about energy. Energy comes in different forms. One form can be converted into another form. You can convert kinetic energy into mechanical energy, mechanical energy into kinetic energy, and also here you can convert light energy into heat energy and electrical energy into heat energy, electrical energy into light energy, and also heat energy can be converted into electricity. Energy can be converted from one form to another form. So you know that if you drop a plate from a height, the potential energy of the plate is converted into sound energy when it hits the ground. If we light a candle, you know that it is an exothermic reaction. In this process, chemical energy in the wax is converted into heat energy. Here, the chemical energy is converted into heat energy. And also we will get the light energy on burning. The total energy during a physical or chemical process remains the same, but suppose we consider burning candle again. Here, the heat and light energy generated along with the products of the reaction to get back the chemical energy in the form of wax. You know that after burning completely, again there will be wax. Again that chemical energy is in the form of wax. So in our daily lives, use energy from various sources for doing work. We use here kerosene, coal, wood, fuel to get energy to cook food, and also use petrol, diesel, etc. to our transport, and also use electricity to get light, and also to run radio, television, etc. And also we can use the muscular energy for carrying out physical work. We need to know how do we select the source needed for obtaining the energy in its usable form. We have to think about some questions. We have to ask ourselves how much heat does it release on burning? Is it produces smoke? Is it easily available? That you have to think here. Then what are the characteristic of good fuel? The characteristic of good source of energy are it should give adequate amount of net energy or work per unit volume of mass. It must be convenient to use so as to give energy at steady rate. It must be easy to store and transport. It must be economical. So then what are the characteristics of good sources of energy? First one you write, it should give an adequate amount of net energy. It should give adequate amount of net energy or work per unit volume of mass or work per unit volume of mass. And second one you can write, it must be convenient to use so as to give energy at steady rate. Energy at steady rate. And third one you write, it must be easy to store and transport. It must be easy to store and transport. And it must be economical. Must be economical. So these are the characteristics of good fuel. So it should give required amount of net energy, that is the work per unit volume of a mass, and also it must give energy at steady rate, and it must be easy to store and transport, and it must be economical. So these are the characteristics of good fuel, and also these are the characteristics of good sources of energy. In your textbook there are 3 questions. The first question is, what is a good source of energy? A good source of energy would depend on the requirement for which energy is needed. For example, we use one source, say gas, for cooking food, and another source, say electricity, for heating a room. In general, a good source of energy would be one which would do a large amount of work per unit mass or per unit volume, and which one is easily accessible and which can be easily stored and transported, and which is also reasonably economical. So you write that answer here. A good source of energy would depend on Good source of energy would depend on the requirement for which energy is needed. So in general, a good source of energy would be one first one which would do a large amount of work which would do a large amount of work per volume. Second one which would be easily accessible. Easily. Third one which can be easily stored and transported. And next you can say which is also reasonably economical. These are the good source of energy. Next, what is a good fuel? So, you know the characteristic of good fuel. It should be cheap, it should be easily available, its ignition temperature should be reasonably above normal temperature, and it should be conveniently handled and transported. Conveniently handled, stored and transported. So, you write. So, write characteristics of good fuel. Characteristic of good fuel. First one, it should be fairly cheap. It should be cheap. Second, it should be easily available. It should be easily available. Third one, its ignition temperature, its burning temperature should be reasonably above normal temperature. Its ignition temperature should be reasonably above normal temperature. Then it should be conveniently handled, stored and transported. It should be conveniently handled, stored and transported. So these are the characteristics of good fuel. So it must be easily available and it must be fairly cheap. It should not be costly and its ignition temperature should be reasonably above normal temperature. If it is equals to the normal temperature, and you know that at room temperature you can't handle it, so it ignites in that temperature only, so it is difficulty to handle. So it should be conveniently handled, stored and transported. These are the characteristics of good fuel. Next one, let us write, it should not produce any poisonous materials or irritating fumes during burning. So you write, during burning it should not produce any poisonous material, any poisonous materials or irritating fumes, or irritating fumes. And next also you can write, its combustion rate should be steady and controllable. Its combustion rate should be steady and controllable. And it should not leave any residue or ash after burning. It should not leave any residue or ash after burning. Then also you can say that it should burn in a way that it can be controlled. It should burn in the controlled manner. It should burn in a way that can be controlled. In a way that can be controlled. Then the third question, if you could use any source of energy for heating your food, which one would you use and why? So naturally we will use LPG, and also you can use CNG, that is compressed natural gas. So you write the answer, we would prefer to use cooking gas like LPG, so what is LPG? Liquid petroleum gas. Liquid petroleum gas or CNG. What is CNG? That is compressed natural gas. Compressed natural gas. It fulfills many of the criteria of a good fuel. Most importantly, like its ignition temperature, good calorific value, and non-pollution characteristics. Why you prefer this? Because these fuels, it fulfill many of the criteria of a many of the criteria of a good fuel. Most importantly, so you take here its ignition temperature, good calorific value, good calorific value, and non-pollution characteristics, and non-pollution characteristics. Its ignition temperature is more than the normal temperature, and it is having maximum calorific value, means it gives maximum heat per volume. Its ignition temperature is more than the normal temperature. Its calorific value is also maximum. It gives maximum heat per volume, and it is non-polluting. So it is friend to the environment. It will not cause any pollution to the environment. So because of all this reason, it is better to use liquid petroleum gas LPG and compressed natural gas. You can use LPG or CNG. You can prefer LPG or CNG because it satisfies most of all the good characteristics of the fuel, and also it is having good calorific value and pollution less burning.